Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast. My name's Charlotte, and I work as a Year 2 teacher in a primary school in London. Now, if you haven't heard any of Hanaz Writers Podcast before, then have a listen on their podcast channels. They've got one on Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Podbean, YouTube, and Spotify. You can search for Hanaz Writers Podcast on these websites, and you can start listening to all the available podcasts on them. In the last few podcasts, I've been talking about the 7 different types of creative writing, and they are poetry, plays, movies and television scripts, fiction such as novels, novellas, and short stories, songs, speeches, memoirs, and personal essays. In the previous podcast, I've already spoken about short stories, novels, plays, movies, and television scripts, songwriting, poetry, speeches, and memoirs, and how they're seen as creative pieces of writing. I compared each different type of writing to each other and discussed how similar and different they are. So today's podcast, I'm going to talk about the last form of the 7 creative writing pieces. As I mentioned earlier, that is the personal essays. Personal essays are one of the most powerful and flexible forms of creative non-fiction writing. And when you hear the words personal essay, you might get a flashback to maybe high school, English class, or college admissions, maybe, when they're prompting you. Maybe a teacher is talking and going on about how important a personal essay is. And it's what an employer will be reading. And it will help you to maybe get your first job or lead you to a role that could help support you out in the real world. And it's the answer to that question. Tell me about a time where you had to show, for example, resilience in a difficult moment. The personal essay is a place where real life meets imagination, where reflection meets some structure, and you and your voice and your thoughts and your perspectives on something become the main character. So let's break it down. What makes a personal essay a piece of creative writing? First of all, what is a personal essay? Let's have a quick definition. Personal essay is a short work of non-fiction, and it explores a topic through the lens of your personal experience. So it's very similar to a memoir. However, the memoir is your own memory or something. With the personal essay, it's a reflective, subjective piece of writing. It doesn't just say, here's what happened. It says, here's what I think about what happened. And maybe you'll see something of yourself in it too. So unlike journalism or academic writing, a personal essay doesn't pretend to be objective. It is also subjective and it shows it in its writing. And that's exactly where the creativity comes in. The personal essay is your own voice. It is your rhythm, your internal dialogue. And it's that voice that shapes not just the content of your writing, but the meaning of your writing as well, the meaning of the piece that you're writing about. So why is it creative writing? At the heart of it, a personal essay uses the techniques of a fictional piece of writing, poetry even, and other creative genres. Let me give you a few examples. Scene and sensory detail. So instead of just saying, I was nervous before the job interview, creative personal essay might paint the moment. My palms were damp, my knee was bouncing under the chipped Starbucks table, the clock over the barista's head ticked like a countdown. So you're not just telling us about something, you're showing us as well. And that's a hallmark of the creative writing process and why it is creative writing. Metaphor and symbolism. Writers often use metaphor to make internal experiences tangible for the reader. Maybe your anxiety feels like a swarm of bees, or your grief feels like a fog that just won't lift and leave you. You're translating your emotions into the image, and that's being deeply creative. Structure and pacing. A personal essay isn't always linear. You can jump around in time, very similar to a memoir. You can weave in some memories, maybe even a few rhetorical questions. and even imagined moments. So you could say something like, I thought it was going to be this way. I imagined that in my head it would go like this. But in reality, this is what happened. Some essays might start in the middle of the story and then loop back to the beginning, or they might just spiral forward and carry on and just jump from the middle to the end and then back to the beginning. The structure itself is a creative choice. It's one that mirrors the way that our mind kind of works. You might be thinking about a particular event. Maybe you had said something or you'd seen something and that really stuck in your mind. And it's something that you want to talk about. So you start off with that image and you'd start off with that event and you talk about it and what happened. Then you backtrack and say what led you to that place in the first place, and then you so on and so on. Then you carry on writing and, everything just spills out at the end. Voice and tone. Now, this one is a huge thing for your personal essay. It's where your voice lives. It's your own voice and where you write and how you think and how you talk as well and how you speak. It could be snarky or poetic, maybe melancholy, brutally honest if that's the way you want to go. But the tone is what you choose. It's your artistic decision on it. Your voice is what draws the reader in. It's what makes the essay come to life and feel alive and helps the reader to get a feel for what you were actually thinking and feeling at that time. But the truth is material. It's not a limitation of what you're writing. And here's where people sometimes get confused. They're like, wait, they ask, if it's nonfiction and it's about you, then how is that creative? How is that a creative piece of writing? Well, the answer is that creativity isn't about making things up in this sense. You're not writing a fictional story. You're not writing about something magical happening or like Narnia, where you go through the back of a closet and you end up in a new country and a new world. It's about making meaning and giving meaning to what happened. It's about you giving a voice to your thoughts and your feelings and to the events that has happened. In the personal essay, you're not reinventing the facts. You're not making stuff up, but you can decide what to include in the essay. You can decide what to emphasize. You can use what lens. So if you want a more sympathetic voice and you want the reader to see sympathy, you'll go down the sympathetic route. You want the reader to feel excitement and joy, and then you'll go through that route and you'll write in that kind of way and uplifting moments. Even if the moment itself might not be uplifting, you want to then lighten the mood. So you write and add metaphors, and you might write some alliteration. You might add in a few funny comments that you want to say. And you help to shape the reader's experience in that way. You're kind of curating the reality, and that's part of the creative writing. Maybe what happened wasn't a joyful moment. Maybe it was a really boring moment, but you want to make it sound exciting. You want to make it sound interesting. So you have to then think about, how am I going to write the story in that interesting way? How does this make the reader feel? Will the reader feel excited about this? Will they feel upset by it? Are they meant to feel upset? Are they meant to feel excited? And so on and so on. And then that's what sets apart your creative writing to just writing exactly what happened in a boring way. So think of the raw material of your life, kind of like maybe a lump of clay. And the creative essayist doesn't just plop the clay down and say, there you go, piece of clay, big lump. You sit there, you mold it, you look at it, you smooth it out, you cut away pieces that, don't need to be part of the shape. You're creating a mug or a cup or a vase. You're going to create it in your own way, not just a lump of lumpy, moldy clay. You want to craft it. So you're going to craft your narrative, your same thing. You're thinking about a time in your life. As I went back to the question, think of a time in your life that you had a moment and you needed to show some resilience in that moment. You're going to go, oh yeah, I just collapsed into a piece of crying. You're not going to say, I'm going to cry. You just collapsed into something that cried. Sorry, that makes no sense, but do you know what I mean? You're not going to write something like, in that moment, in that time when everything was pressured and there was a lot of pressure, In that moment, I took a breath, I steadied myself, I readied myself. Then I thought, what needs to be done? First, tackle the small things first, then the big thing. And then you talk about the resilience that you had to go through. So even though the events are real, the telling of the story can be imaginative and creative in that sense. So personal essays are a discovery. One of the most beautiful things about writing a personal essay is that you don't have to know the conclusion of it when you start. In fact, many of the best essays are written by people who are still in the middle of their confusion about it, and they're still trying to figure something out. They're still trying to work it out. And there's a term for this. It's called the essayistic impulse. And the word essay comes from the French essayer, which means to try. So a personal essay is not just a declaration, it's also an exploration. You're trying to work out something, you're trying to figure something out. Essayer, you're trying it. You can start with a question, maybe a rhetorical question, or a hunch, or just a strange memory that you've never fully understood, Something happened when you were a kid, and you're still trying to come to terms with it about what did that mean? What was it all about? And then you're using your writing as a way to kind of help you uncover what it means. Maybe you don't even get to that point. Maybe you're just writing about it, and it's just writing about it helps you to maybe resolve the issue, maybe resolve the confusion, maybe to help you just think about, actually, maybe I just didn't understand and I still don't understand, but that's okay. And that process of writing about it, that journey of giving some meaning making even, to what happened to the experience is inherently creative. Some famous examples we can go through. A few great personal essayists, such as James Baldwin. He blended personal experience with his cultural critique in essays like Notes of a Native Son. Joan Didion, she used her razor-sharp prose to capture grief, identity, and the instability of a memory. David Foster Wallace, he played with structure and footnotes in his writing to explore everything from cruise ships to despair. Maggie Nelson in the Argonauts merged personal and theoretical in a lyrical and fragmented form in her writing. Now, each of these writers, they take the personal and they use it as a springboard into something larger and something beautifully crafted in their writing. So why does it matter? Why should we care that the personal essay is creative? Essentially, it's because it reminds us that our lives aren't just things that happen. They're the stories that we carry, the stories that we shape. And when we tell these stories well, with craft and with courage and creativity, we can connect with other people, the readers. We connect with ourselves as well. We connect with each other. And maybe we connect with something a bit deeper. But the whole point of writing a personal essay is to teach us how to notice things, how to reflect on things, and how to make art from the everyday. And let's be real, I think we need more of that at this point in our lives. So try it yourself. If you're curious, maybe you write your own personal essay. Here are a few creative prompts that you can use to get you started if you're interested in writing. Number one, maybe write about a moment that you can't forget and explore why this is a moment that still lingers. Why is it a moment you can't forget? What's the reason behind it? Number two, maybe begin with the sentence, I didn't know it at the time, but. And then that will help springboard you into thinking about moments in time that help to shape you into who you are now. For example, maybe something happened when you were 7 years old and you didn't know at that time, but it led you to where you are now. Maybe you can just describe a small object that you own and tell the story behind it. In our everyday lives, we collect things, we gain things, we buy things, we get gifts. Sometimes you forget. You put that gift away. You're like, oh, that's a nice gift. I'll use it one day. You put it aside. years go by and it's still there on the table or it's still there in your box. You open your box and you find it and you're like, oh, I forgot about this object. And then you could tell your story behind it. That's also a nice way to springboard back into memories, back into things and people that you used to know, people that you still know, maybe. And another thing you could do, another creative prompt, is to explore a contradiction that you live with. This one might be even trickier. Explore a contradiction that you live with. Maybe in your workplace, you're a very neat person. So you have everything sorted on your table and your cupboards and your drawers at work. When you come home, everything's messy. So that's a contradiction that you live with. At work, you have to have everything organized and in place. But when you get home, everything's messy and you know it's a mess, but you know where things are in the mess. Might be a bit relevant to quite a lot of people nowadays. So these are some creative prompts to help you get started in writing your own essay. Of course, there might be other creative prompts out there. So have a look online if you're interested and or think about it yourself. What could you write about in your moment in life? Maybe you can pick a time 20 years ago. What happened 20 years ago on this day, if you remember? Or what happened 20 years ago when you were 20 years younger? And how does that feel? Maybe you're 10 years younger and pick 5 years younger and go from there. It's interesting to see what things were like 5 years ago versus 10 years ago. Or if you're old enough, 30 years ago. So remember, you don't need to be an important celebrity or important person to write your own personal essay. You just need to be honest with what you're writing, thoughtful and in what you're writing, and willing to look a little bit more closely, kind of analyze things and be open to what you write about. I'm not saying that you have to show someone this. You don't have to show anyone this. It's your own personal essay, something personal, as it says, and it's for you. Sometimes writing about things helps us to clarify things and helps us to internalize things and get it out from internal into the external. Maybe you didn't realize you've been internalizing some anger over the time that this happened, or internalizing some kind of pain or joy, or it's just kind of a nostalgic thought. You're like, oh, I remember that time. It was great. Or, oh, I remember that time. It was such a sad moment. So, next time that someone says creative writing, try not to just think about novels and poetries and short stories. Think about the personal essay as well, where life and language meet and truth becomes art. That's all for this podcast, and that ends my 7-week or 8-week long creative writing podcast. If you've enjoyed them, thank you very much for listening. If you missed the podcast as well, you can go backtrack and find them. I've done about 8 podcasts on creative writing and the different styles and types of writing that you can do creatively. If you enjoyed this podcast, I've got many more other ones. Please like and subscribe, Hanaz Writers, on their podcast channels. They have one on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, YouTube, and Spotify. And there are so many of my podcasts on there already, and you can start listening to them all when you want. Also, if you're interested in becoming a published author yourself, then why not visit Hanaz Writers' website? You can sign up for free, write your own stories, your poems, your memoirs, your songs, your lyrics, your poems, your speeches, television shows, movie scripts, memoirs, of course, and maybe even a personal essay on there. And you can also get some help and guidance on how to publish them through the website. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time, bye!